Our conversation and demo tonight. And this is Plant Powered Metro New York. And we welcome you to an Earth Month celebration. It's still April. We're still celebrating Earth Month. And so we're here tonight to talk about the earth, to talk about urban farming and the soil, the food that comes from it. And if you don't know, we are Plant Powered Metro New York, which has a vision for people to be free of illness, which is done by what we're eating. So this is all about whole foods, plant-based recipes, also those that are doing them, whether it's a chef, sometimes we are doing demos, but tonight is actually all about where the food grows, because we need to make that connection, and we are celebrating Earth Night or Earth Month. So we do have Henry Obispo, who is founder, eco-gastronomer, social entrepreneur, the founder of ReBORN Farms, and Henry is doing vertical farming in the Bronx. I will let him tell you more about himself. He's from the Dominican Republic. He won a Thrive competition for the United Business Cooperative because, of course, farming also impacts social entrepreneurs. And then in the New York City Economic Development Corporation, he won that competition. So Henry, you may not know him, but he's been doing a lot of work in the Bronx around farming, around plant-based foods for many years. And we are so honored and happy to have Henry tonight to speak to us, to tell us himself about farming in New York City. New York City has over 500 farms, urban farms. There are urban farms at schools as well. And it's all about reclaiming the land, which Henry will tell us more about. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. I've been expecting and anticipating this moment because it's really a treat to engage with you and everyone in the audience because of the mission that Plant Powered Metro New York has. And it's a mission that I share. So I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, and you've had a long-term relationship with Plant Powered Metro New York. And we were trying to get you on for MLK, but you were unavailable then. But we are happy to have you, happy to see you doing well and back in your kitchen.
Yes, thank you. I had a bout with COVID, and it was a bit a harsh one, and I managed to pull that, pull out of that successful. So as a result, I'm here.
Yes.
And I'm also coming again out of a second wave of COVID, which is like, you just never know when it's going to hit you, and the multiple times. It's kind of like the reality that we live in now. It's really a sign of the times, really.
Yeah. So as we talk tonight, even that, because I know when we had reached out to you before and you were unavailable, and then we finally got to talk and you were sharing that with me. And yes, I'm so happy you are doing well. You look well. And my gosh, you're such a resource for everyone. So we're really happy that you came through. But maybe at some point you can even talk about what some of the things that you did as you were coming out and related to what you're eating and the foods that you're using even now to rebuild. I think that would be really helpful because all of us are in some way dealing with the pandemic.
Yes, I think it's very important because I learned so much in the process. I thought I knew a lot, and I think we all know a lot, but it's not the same when you go through a life-altering situation like that, especially when it's severe or when you've been hospitalized.
Yeah.
You end up engaging your habits, and you end up also just acquiring new knowledge as to what it is that you require at that moment to move forward.
Yeah, which is so helpful to us all as we're trying to build our immune systems, make sure that they stay strong. And obviously, both of us are true believers in the fact that eating a whole foods plant-based diet is the way to do it. And so we live in a city now where this conversation around eating vegan is louder than ever, which I'm really excited about. I'm really excited to look and see what the new administration has in store. And my focus is very much school lunch and children, because I really believe that when we start early, we develop habits. Because that's the thing, right? That it's even for us who are trying to teach adults, which I know you are. It's changing those habits and changing that mindset, which Plant Powered Metro New York is doing a spectacular job with their Jumpstart 21-day Jumpstart program, which is completely free. And people can sign up for that if they go to the website, which is all about educating. You need to know the why of what you're doing, not just that you're eating differently, but why you're eating differently. So I think that is something that is really vital to making that change. And that already. But I love that you said that you learn new things from your experience, and you learned what your body needed in the moment, because we're fluid, we're dynamic, right? And even as we age, things change. And sometimes it's environmental as well, right? So, Henry, tell us a little bit about your past, like where you grew up and some of the things that inspired you.
Yeah, I yeah, I'm just listening to you. It was, I felt really good about where I think we're going. Obviously, we should be farther ahead in terms of a society, but where the city specifically is going when it comes to food and how we're talking about systems and how we're engaging our local populations that have been disinvested in. I think that conversation is happening, or those conversations are happening, and it really is as a result of our COVID reality that lifted that veil of injustice in many ways, and the realities of those that suffered the most under this pandemic. And it's usually communities like my community in the South Bronx, and communities of color. Um, but a little bit about me, I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I lived there until the age of 5 when I migrated here. So my mom migrated here before me, and uh, I stayed with my aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandmother. And it was actually the best case scenario for me because I received so much um, attention and affection in the absence of my mother, because my family wanted to, in many ways, uh, just make sure that I was okay and safeguard me. And those experiences early on really nurtured me. And as a result, I saw those examples and I wanted to, moving forward, I had a very conscious way of engagement, which was a very, I would say, uh, community, family oriented way of engaging with people. And so I wanted to give the same to my environment as I grew up, in the same way that I was given when I was younger. And life in the Dominican Republic, although there were um, some societal constraints, it was an amazing place for a kid growing up because I was given the space to really be free to wander, and to also experiment. And I started experimenting very, very early as a child. I have memory of being 2.5 years old, 3 years old, and scavenging in the backyard. We had a vast backyard, and I had such an interest in plants and fruits, specifically fruits. I became obsessed with them. So I started experimenting with plants, and I started experimenting with what I could do with this, or what I could get as a result of a fruit and turn it into something, right? Turn it into a juice, turn it into a jam, turn it into something, a candy. And that was really where my imagination was as a kid. And so that early on, I started engaging with food and cooking, really, and just imagining what I could create. And my passions were really sort of solidified then, at that age, because I was allowed to engage, because I was given freedom to just do whatever I wanted, and experiment. And I would say that that is probably the most formative um, time of my life, because it became my core. And so when I moved to the Bronx, even though we didn't have any of these trees, we didn't have the nature that I was engaging on, and we didn't have a lot of the things I had back in the Dominican Republic. I didn't feel that freedom, because now we were constrained in smaller apartments. I still kept that aspect of me from childhood that never died, and I wanted to recreate that here in the Bronx for people. And that really is the core of everything that I do, in essence.
Wow. That just goes back to the fact that it happens in the child's brain. That's the stage of development where we're being the most impacted. So, just as in your story of being a forager at 3 years old is pretty amazing, but I always notice how children seem to have an intrinsic understanding of healthy food. And even if it's just by the nature of what it looks like, the colors, the shapes, all of those things, they're greatly impacted by. And so to hear your story about your own experience and how greatly you were impacted, that even though years went by, that seed, you see what I did there, right? That seed was planted.
Yeah, I often tell people, because I realize as a young adult that, as I was searching for myself of what it was that I went to college, I did all of these things. And there are these immigrant pressures, right? That you're supposed to be successful, you're supposed to do certain things, you're supposed to move your family forward also in so many ways. And I realized that I was tapping into all of these pressures, and that I wanted them to materialize in many ways that we know, like titles, or I wanted to go to law school, or I wanted to go to business school, etc. And that was my track until in my early 20s, I realized that my core was actually where I needed to go back to, because it never left me. It was always there, but the outside pressures were sort of like, engaging with me as well. But it's about making the decision that you should be doing what it was that you loved at the age of 5. And that goes for everybody. At the age of 5, what did you love? It may not be literal, in the sense that, oh, you love cartoons. It may not be that, but maybe you loved an aspect of engaging with cartoons. Maybe you loved coloring it. Maybe it was art. Maybe it was about the clothing. Maybe it was about something. And sometimes it is literal, like it was for me. And so it was realizing that and tapping back into that child, that allowed me to really like liberate myself from the outside pressures. And once you liberate yourself from that, you open your life up to your purpose. And that's where I've been pretty much walking in since then.
Wow. That's amazing, Henry. I mean, that's just so deep, but also the fact that the community that was built around you and how you're bringing that to the city. There is community, but having community around wellness is something really different. So, when did you start Farm in the City?
So I, it's a winding road for me because I graduated college. I ended up going to graduate school. And after graduate school, I decided to move to Cuba. And I was doing research in Cuba and uh, uh, based on my graduate degree, which was about social movements. I kind of crafted my own degree because I wanted, I'm always uh, sort of in awe of people that create movements and created in the past social movements. And so I felt within me that I wanted to create one as well or be a part of one. And so uh, I crafted this degree to be able to engage deeply in that. And so traveling to Cuba and living there for about a year and a half and bringing back those experiences and the research I did there. And then I ended up moving to Brazil and lived there for about 3 years and engaged really deeply in the culture and absorbed it like it was my own. And what I realized in these places, also with the context of where I was born, was that there were so many similarities around the Black and Brown experience. And food was a common denominator around that. And the restrictions around it and the design of a system that keeps us away from the best food and from us being nourished was all by design wherever you went for the most part. And so bringing that back and that realization about 8 years ago, I started engaging in um, research in my community, really engaging deeply on the ground and canvassing I would say, the South Bronx.
So I'm wondering if you can hear me, Henry, because we're not hearing you at the moment. I'm not hearing. And so let's see what we can do about this tech issue we have going on. Henry, can you hear me? I think maybe your ear things, uh, the ear pods.
Chef Rebecca, his microphone went out.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. Great. You're back. So yeah,
Yes.
you were talking about actually when you were talking, I was thinking when you were talking about being in the Dominican Republic and seeing these social systems and seeing that everywhere you went, they were by design. That's what you were talking about, which for me is like,
Yes.
okay, the microphone cut out then. Here we go again, being silent around this issue, right?
Yeah, literally. And so that my learnings and my travels, and once I was able to put all of these things together, was that there is a design around people that look like this, that look like me. Um, and it is a structural design, and it is a system, and it is embedded in everything that we do. And so realizing that and really activated me once I came back because I was able to canvass the South Bronx by way of a grant that I received from the USDA. And it was really around focusing on the community, but a level of focus that was intentional around solutions. And this allowed me to canvas with stakeholders and institutions and activists, and really to learn what was done here, what is being done in terms of solutions, and how can things come together to be even more powerful. So that allowed me to now realize what I could do and put everything together. And it really has taken this amount of time to coalesce that, because it's a huge structural issue. And so as a result of that, I needed to engage in a very structural way. And the first thing was engaging and launching my social enterprise, Born Juice.
And so tell us about Born Juice, because I had another question for you, but I want a little bit more about Born Juice.
Sure. So Born Juice, I actually have I made a little juice for us to toast.
Awesome. I don't have any, but I'll get to try it
I'll
sometime.
get you one next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Born Juice is a social enterprise, and the idea around it, what we wanted to achieve was to engage people. Because of my obsession with fruits, I wanted to engage people in the Bronx around my obsession, not necessarily because of me, but because I felt that the population was missing this incredible gift that we have, that nature has given us, which is fruits. And I couldn't understand why people weren't obsessed like me. So I pretty much engaged institutions and schools and created pop-ups all over the South Bronx for 2 to 3 years, with the idea of bringing solutions to them and bringing the fruits to them. And the fruits would be in many ways converted to juice, to smoothies, to show them a process that they could engage in with these fruits to make things interesting. And so that really was the beginning of Born Juice, and it morphed from there because we also focus on a zero waste component, and also tapping into that locally sourced produce that we could engage with whenever we could receive it seasonally. And as it stands, Born Juice, we are now looking to open up our first location, which was supposed to have opened before COVID, and then COVID hit. And now we're in the process of re-engaging that idea so that we can now offer that in a brick and mortar to the local population here.
And so the brick and mortar is in the Bronx, going to be
It will be in the Bronx. It will be in the South Bronx, in the Mott Haven area.
Mott Haven. Okay. Are you in Mott Haven?
I am. It is where I live.
Yeah. So much is going on in Mott Haven right now. The whole area.
Too much is going on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about related to food insecurity is you are making an interesting connection between food security and reclaiming health. A lot of times we do hear about food insecurity, some solutions, as you said, which we're going to talk more about, your process of discovering what some of these great solutions can be. But can you talk about that connection between the two?
Yeah, so it is, I'm not sure why it's never, or it's not linked in everyone's imagination or in everyone's mind when they speak about food. I guess, people are having that conversation now when it comes to like food being medicine, food as medicine, but we've all engaged in those ideas, especially those of us that are in the plant-based community, realizing that it obviously is medicine, and it is the most powerful medicine that we have. And it is engaging that reality with an idea of farming that is really, I think, powerful for a population like the population in the South Bronx and populations similar to this one. As you know, the South Bronx is the poorest urban congressional district in the country. And obviously, like we said earlier, a lot of that is by design. And along with that poverty comes the health comorbidities, which is, when it comes to New York State, we are 62nd out of 62 counties in terms of health disparities. So when you step back and you see the realities here, you're able to link and to see the fact that food, this idea of like food desert, yes, there's this idea that engages the South Bronx, it being a food desert. But I would argue that the South Bronx is not a food desert, right? That what it is more like a food swamp, right? In the sense that there is food here, it's just not good food. There is food here, it's just processed food. There is food here, it's just junk food. And so that is what people are feeding themselves with. And our engagement at ReBORN Farms is saying, no, we need to re-engage this idea of what food is and connect that to upward mobility, connect that to health, connect that to all aspects of life, because food is actually the cornerstone of it all. And that's how we've identified it. And that's how we frame our projects and our not our mission, but really our initiatives also.
So I actually am looking at the comments, Henry, and Nicole says she's trying to grow vegetables on her balcony in the Bronx. Can you give
Amazing.
some tips about what she might want to grow and maybe how?
I mean, tomatoes are always incredible to grow. I'm very fond of tomatoes. I opt for that because they can be so abundant and also so forgiving. The right kind of tomatoes, and they can go a very long time. Really, from like the spring to like early fall or early to mid fall. And it's in many ways, it just is a plant that just doesn't need that much tending, but keeps giving. I would encourage you to grow that. Also, if you I don't know if there is space there when it comes to yeah. So peppers are always amazing to grow. It doesn't require that much. It really you can really engage all types of peppers throughout the year also. And again, it doesn't require much when it comes to tending. And again, it's a plant that the pepper plant keeps on giving, keeps on producing. Those are my two go-tos because you can do so much with tomatoes and with peppers,
Sure.
depending also on the varieties. Those are probably the most versatile of things that we can grow in our apartments and in general, really.
Yeah, love both, and making all sorts of things hot and cold out of peppers
Exactly.
and tomatoes, right? So I actually also do want to say a CE is actually asking about the grant that you mentioned with the USDA grant. And the question is, is it connected to a land grant?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. That grant was not connected to a land grant, but it was more of like a study for future funding, depending also on our findings. It was a very small grant. I believe it was about $20,000 to $25,000 in comparison to like all the grants that are out there. And it really was in collaboration with a local nonprofit here in the Bronx that sort of was vying for that grant and married a lot of what I was doing in that project to that grant. And we were able to take it really far, so far that, it brought us here, and it's brought all these initiatives, some of the most successful initiatives in the Bronx as a result of the knowledge that was gained and the engagement and the know-how by way of that canvassing for those close to 6 months that grant allowed.
So CE lives in Chicago, and Henry's Instagram is at Sustainable Poppy, PAPI. So you can reach out to him, because I know one of the things that you do, Henry, as a social entrepreneur is help other entrepreneurs learn about food and possibly something like this. Because if you're living in a place that you're saying, like Chicago, where there is no fresh food anywhere around, part of the system, as you mentioned, is forcing you to go outside your neighborhood, if you can go outside your neighborhood to find fresh food. No farmers markets. So it sounds like that area would be ripe for something like this. But people really do need to know how to go forward and where to find these kinds of grants. So I'm that's your Instagram, so you can definitely reach out to Henry.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to reach out and ask me whatever question. I have some experiences with grants and some level of engagement with different types of grants. So I definitely would love to maybe guide you to where you can find solutions for the issues that you're identifying in your neighborhood or in your state or in your city, for sure.
Yeah, because some of the cases the case that you need to make for that is the benefits and impact of urban farming. And they're endless. Not just about the food, but how it affects the financial health of an area, a district. It can even impact the water system. So why don't you talk about that, Henry?
Yeah, so I'd like to sort of like engage a bit as to how it is that we are engaging this farming and why, right? Um, because of that, exactly what you mentioned, but because of the realities on the ground here in the South Bronx and in New York City, we are a highly, I would say, um, saturated city in the sense that we live on top of each other. And space is a commodity here. Land is almost, impossible to get unless you are very wealthy or you are, working within government to create a project, whatever that is. And so there is an opportunity here and in cities and areas like the South Bronx to engage farming in a different way. It may not be as ideal as farming in the traditional way, but we realize that if we want to engage in food sovereignty and we want to, our aim is to create a local food system, a true local food system, then we must engage through other means because we don't have that land here to farm enough for this population. And also the seasons may not allow us to engage that way. So therefore we're engaging in hydroponic farming. And specifically that type of farming allows for us to use less resources. Our farm, or the phase one of our farm, is in actually public housing. It is a project that has become the first one of its kind nationally to really have a farm in public housing, specifically on a rooftop. So ours is a rooftop garden where we engage in hydroponic farming with the idea of engaging that community that has been so heavily disadvantaged and devastated historically. And also create education and a pipeline of jobs that could allow for us to build an actual food system that can run year round. And it makes sense for us because we live in buildings and we have access to roofs. We may not have the land, but we have rooftops where we can engage like this. And this is a model that can allow us to have that level of sovereignty, whereas someone maybe in the Midwest may have that land, and which is the ideal way of engaging, obviously. But for us here, we don't have that. So we have to deal with the realities that we have to be able to understand how we're going to move forward and how we're going to empower ourselves. So by no means am I saying that the best way of engaging in an agricultural way is through hydroponic farming. The ideal way is through soil farming, and then hydroponics should be in many ways an accessory to that. And specifically when it comes to this community, because of the devastation, because of the realities here, and because we're building a system, we need to engage it in a very specific way. And so that is why we engage in urban farming the way we do.
And so tell us the benefits of urban farming.
So the benefits there's so many, whether it's soil-based or hydroponic, it's the idea that you have a hyper-local food, that you have access to something that was grown today, that you can eat it today, that you can harvest it, that it was harvested for you, that it didn't have to travel miles to get to you. It's not revolutionary because that's how we've engaged throughout human history, but it is in many ways us understanding that that is how things should be. That is how the food system should be engaged. But we have in many ways veered away from that. And when I say we, it's not us, because we're forced in a system in many ways. But we've been engaging in this system that doesn't benefit us, but benefits others. And so that's one of the benefits, this hyper-local component that reduces CO2 as a result of that, that also disengages this idea of pesticides and pumping your water systems, because you're doing this industrial farming that requires, all of this, it requires all of that to uphold it for it to even quote unquote function, but we all know it's not functioning. So that's one aspect. Specifically when it comes to hydroponics, it's also not a new way of farming. It's actually thousands of years old. You can date that back to, some say, the Egyptians that were engaging by the Nile in that type of farming, but also when you look at what is now Mexico City and that area, ancient Tenochtitlan, that is in many ways how they farmed a lot of their food, which was hydroponically. And it is a viable way of engaging. And specifically for us, we have a system that does water catchment, where we engage with rainwater, because we believe that that is the way you should capture and feed your crops, because obviously it's a better water, but also because you're not tapping into any other resource. And it is also an efficient way of engaging agriculturally, because it's on a rooftop and it's absorbing that sun as it is a greenhouse. So there are those aspects of energy and resource that allow us to pretty much use even 95% less water hydroponically from that rainwater that we catch.
Wow. So, when I travel, Henry, and I go to, let's say, a place like Costa Rica or, South America, other areas, I always notice a difference in the food. I notice a difference in the way it tastes, the availability of it. And it's just so interesting that we live in one of the wealthiest places in the world, but people are starving, not just from lack of food, but the lack of the nutrients in the food, which is what makes a difference. And also, you mentioned pesticides. And in so many other countries, the pesticides are not used. And the food is grown naturally, and almost biodynamically, right? So it really is the industrialization of this process of growing food that is costly, not only, to economically, but also to our health.
Yes, you've hit that right on on the nose. It is that system, but that system is only a mirror and a sort of a speck of the bigger reality, which is it's a colonial paradigm, right? Which is a colonial project, which is extracting, taking, reaping. Those ideas that you can do that you can take ownership, have ownership of a land, extract the land, that you can petrify something, that you can engage in with the resources that we have, that you can engage in that way because you can take ownership and extract it. It's a bigger, I would say, a, a bigger paradigm that influences that. And that's just, I would say, one of the ways that we see our society engage. But our society engages in that same way in pretty much every aspect of life, in that extractive way of engagement, in that punitive way, in that level of ownership, in that taking of people's time and efforts. And I also, when you're talking about the food, the depletion of nutrients, it's the result of that reality. Because when you extract, when you take, those are the results of that colonial paradigm. And we're just really talking about one aspect of that, but that is at the core.
Since the beginning, one of the things that we were chatting about before we came on was about, honoring the native land. And, I always like to mention the land that I'm living on, which is Harlem. And it's the actually where they call the land the Quinnahung, or planting neck, and corn and tobacco was raised on this land. But from the very beginning, it's that extraction. I love that word. That's happening, taking from the land, petrifying the land, setting boundaries around the land to say who can grow, who cannot grow, who can eat of the land, who cannot eat of the land. And when you look in, I love when you talk about the food desert versus the food swamp in the Bronx. I live in Harlem. When I go to my local store, there are certain vegetables. And I honestly like my local store because there's some foods, because it's, there's Latin American, Latinx in my neighborhood. So I get some things that you're not going to find at, I won't say any names, but at a fancier supermarket, because that's what the people in my neighborhood want to eat. And so sometimes I trust that food even more because I know it's coming from outside of the US, right? But, it's from the very beginning about, robbing the land and the people who are living on the land.
Yeah, it really is. And by the way, that food swamp analogy was coined by one of the professors at my alma mater, uh, um, at Binghamton University, and it makes so much sense. and because it creates that visual of what we understand of swamp to be. But really, and even when you're thinking about, there's the food desert, now there's this idea of the food swamp, and then there's this idea, to your point, and to the point that we're making now, of food apartheid, that now institutionalizes it and says, oh, okay, it's not just these ideas of food, these general ideas. Now you're able to understand a system around food because it is apartheid. And now you understand what apartheid is. You understand that it is a system. And now you're able to now connect that system to food and understand the processes that it's taken, that level of extraction, that level of conforming it, so that some people are left out, some people reap the rewards, and actually the entire planet is suffering as a result of that model, of that apartheid model, that colonial model.
So why don't you tell us about your food that you have right there on your table?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking, because it's spring, what could be emblematic of spring, something that's a fresh, something that's a local, that could be accessible. And I thought of sort of engaging the food in a very complete way, because we're always thinking about, oh, are we getting enough protein, et cetera, or at least the outside world, as I like to call it, engages people that eat plant-based in those levels of conversation when we do actually get our proteins through plants. But this specific dish is very much so protein heavy, and in a way that we often don't think about, and that's peas, right? So the dish primarily is a pea-based dish with these very seasonal and incredible spears that we want to engage, I guess, your viewing audience, so that they can try it and see how they could, engage in a complete dish and engage in a complete meal with the flavor profiles, with the asparagus and with the peas, and feel fulfilled and actually have the knowledge that they actually engaged a complete meal by just those two ingredients.
Well, show us how.
Sure. So why don't we start with the peas, which is probably takes a little longer. So we'll start with that. If you guys and gals can follow along. I also wanted to say, for anybody out there that spoke Spanish, if they were engaging with us, que hoy vamos a hacer un plato que va a ser basado en asparagus y peas. Y la idea es hacer un plato completo para que tengamos proteína y tengamos por ejemplo, una cena completa para que nos haga sentir satisfecho. Yeah. So I'll start now.
And is the plant an herb, Henry, that you're using there?
I'm sorry?
There's the plant. Is that an herb?
Oh, yes. So this is an herb. This is mint. We're gonna add this mint to our peas, and we're gonna transform what we already know of peas, a sort of like a simple sort of green, I don't know, what would you call that? A vegetable that people sort of, don't even think much about for some reason, but that I believe that they should. They should think about peas in a more dynamic way than, at least in this society, we think of it. I know in other places like the UK And across the globe, peas are, I don't know, they may be more respected, but we seem to sort of not engage them and think of them as sort of like an older person's food or a younger person's food. And so, this is to say it's all of our foods. And we should re-engage with it and make it interesting the way we're going to do now.
I'm excited.
So I'll start. Yeah. So we're going to boil some water, and I'll just engage it here with some filtered water because we want to, I guess, boil these for like 5 minutes, I would say. And the idea is to soften them a little bit so that you're able to then create a smoother puree, if you will.
Are they fresh peas?
Yes.
Or
So
frozen?
these so these peas are fresh. I've managed to engage with my market and get some fresh peas. However, you can get frozen peas, and the idea is that it doesn't matter how you get them, but the idea is that you get them because obviously you can't always find them fresh. Now, I've done this dish so many times that, for me personally, I stopped even cooking them. I pretty much just eat them raw, right? But beyond that, when I puree them, I also puree them like this. And it allows for a very, I would say, sweet, because they're so sweet, a sweet puree. But that's me after having done them, and engaged with this dish for God knows how many times. But for your audience, they can start with this. So we put some of the water to boil. I'm going to add a little salt to the water.
I mean, already, Henry, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I need to better respect peas.
I feel like they've been disrespected, honestly, because, you see them as an ingredient in like a lot of our protein powders. You see them playing a role.
Yes.
Yeah, you see them playing a role when they're processed like that, but not necessarily as peas, or transforming them into something else that we're going to do today. And in many ways, we engage other, whether it's beans, whether it's garbanzos, whatever. We engage them, those legumes, in many different ways. And for some reason, peas just are peas. But I'm here to say that they're not.
Yeah, tonight they're going to be reborn and rebranded.
Exactly. So as we're waiting for our water to boil, and the idea is that we're going to boil them for 5 minutes. Okay. And as we wait for them to boil, I'm going to prepare the water, because this water is going to, once they boil, it's going to stop the cooking process, and it's going to shock them so that they maintain that color, that vibrant color. And you don't need to do that. You can, just go ahead and move forward and blend your peas. But, this is kind of like a cosmetic.
Are you making an ice? Are you making an ice?
So they will be in cold water and in an ice bath to do that shock so that it maintains that vibrant green color. But like I said,
they could do it with anything. You could do it with broccoli, right?
Yeah.
String beans.
Yes, you can do that exactly with most greens that you want to sort of like when food it's beautiful to see your food and to engage your food visually. So this is completely, I would say, you don't have to do it, but it adds a level of sort of beauty to your food.
You eat with your eyes first. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. But optional for other people. So we'll add our ice right now.
So it's just water. It's just water and ice.
Water and ice, and I have a sieve there to capture the peas
Right.
once they are.
You didn't have to do if you were doing broccoli or string beans, but with peas, you absolutely do need something to strain.
Right, exactly.
Now, so
Yes.
what are the other ingredients on your table that you're using for this? It's the asparagus, the mint, the peas?
Yes. So we have here the peas, the asparagus. We have white pepper. We have some salt. We have shallot, a small shallot, and we have a small clove of garlic. We also have the mint, obviously, and we have some black pepper. Now, it all won't go into everything. Specifically for the peas, we are going to add some of the a little bit of salt, the white pepper, and the shallot, along with the mint. And
Okay.
for the asparagus, we're just going to add a little bit of the garlic and the black pepper. It's a very simple way of engagement with food. You don't need a lot, and it's only going to take us maybe 10 minutes to cook.
Okay. We have
So
time.
now the water is boiling. Yeah.
Time.
The water started boiling.
15.
Yeah, how much?
So we're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. The water started to boil, so I'm going to engage the peas for about 5 minutes. I'm going to drop them in. And I'm going to just cover our pot.
So this is a seasonal dish because this is that time of year for asparagus and peas. I love the fact that it's green because this is Earth Month. That's why I wear my little green sweater to honor Earth Month. But, as far as a plant-based diet, we're voting with our fork.
Yes.
We are helping the environment every time we make a choice to eat a plant-based meal. And so that's one of the things that, we teach and can share with people is that you're really helping the planet, you're helping the environment every time you make a food decision. So it's not just about your own health, as you were saying before, about a thriving planet. It's everyone, it's animals, it's other people, it's the soil, it's the land. And so to have such beautiful food that is, that looks great, but also is helping the land, but ultimately your own body, it really is no better way to eat.
I mean, you just said it so beautifully. We have to, in that idea of this colonial model of engagement with our bodies and food, we fractured our relationship to everything around us. And so the idea is to mend that fracture and understand that, you are no different than the animal, you are no different than the soil, you are no different than the water. You all are, everything has personhood. Everything deserves personhood. But in this paradigm that we are engaging in, there's a stripping of that personhood to all of the aspects of the planet and even to certain people. And we've seen that historically, how certain people haven't been persons for hundreds of years, i.e. Black people. And so in many ways, that has been stripped from our environment and how we look at our environment and how we engage with our environment. And the idea is to mend that because we have to, in essence, decolonize our process of engagement with our planet, which is engagement with ourselves, right?
Everything has a personhood. Oh my
Yeah.
God. I was trying to write that in the chat, but I can't put it. So if somebody else wants to write that in the chat, I would really appreciate it. But everything has personhood. Oh my gosh, that is got to be my favorite of tonight.
Yeah, the minute that you add personhood to the water, to the land, to a tree, you can no longer deny it, and you can no longer disrespect it. It is the little secret of a colonial project to strip that away from and just make them objects. But when you personhood them, you can't engage them the same way. And that is very important, that we begin to engage with our environment and engage them with personhood, engage each aspect of our ecosystem with that personhood, so that we can no longer disrespect that. And that I believe that is the way forward of engagement, which is not new. Is the way that a lot of indigenous communities engage with themselves and their environment, and they have this understanding that there is life and personhood in everything around them. And so it's just bringing those ideas back, because they've been so fractured and they've been taken away to uplift a model that actually is extractive and doesn't serve us.
Wow. Thank you. I am so eager to try this recipe.
So I put the clock is at 4 minutes now. So about 4 to 3 more minutes for the peas to be done, and then we can
Asparagus going
that.
Raw in this dish?
No, it's not. No, it's not. So that was next. That's what I was going to engage next. So the asparagus, as you see, I've washed and dried, and these are like some of the most incredible like spears that I've like seen in a very long time. Look at these.
They're beautiful.
They're beautiful. They're so thick. And that's when you know also they're like in season, because otherwise you get the scraggly ones that are so thin, they're like and so dried out. And it's like, you know, why would we buy this? So now is the time to engage with asparagus, right?
Tomorrow, Henry, I'll be out buying asparagus tomorrow.
Yes, and let me know how it goes. So specifically, you want to snap at the asparagus at the very end and allow it to kind of bend itself and to tell you where it wants to snap.
Wow.
It's a very simple sort of process, because you want to, in many ways, engage with the softer side. This one I already did, and put away the sort of tougher part of the asparagus, right?
Never have done that.
Yeah, and so this.
What an amazing chef hack that is.
So, you know, what's left, you don't throw away. You can actually leave it there and like chop it up and put it in a soup. Or you can put it in another dish, saute it. But when it comes to the way that we're engaging the asparagus today, we just want the top of the spears, because that's the most sort of like succulent, right? Part of it. And so these are our spears, and I'm going to put them here because we're about to get ready. It just beeped, and it let me know that this is pretty much good to go. So I'm going to turn this off.
Now, anyone watch? No one's cooking along, but we're all taking notes for sure.
Yeah.
And
as you can see.
Yep. And now they go into ice bath to keep
color. So
So
now I'm going to strain really quickly, and then dump them right in that bath so that they shock. They're in shock, and that preserves that color, and it stops the cooking process. So it allows us to have, you know, that that tenderness that we wanted, but not an overly cooked pea, right? So we'll leave it here for a minute. We'll sort of engage it there, all in that ice bath. And we start preparing our blender because we want to really have a smooth sort of pea puree, right? It's not, we're going for something that's very, very soft to the palate also. So we have the peas there. Now we're going to add a little bit of water because we want to engage our peas, and we want to soften it so that it could have a better consistency and the right consistency that we want.
So while you're doing that, Henry, someone's asking about hydroponic farming, and they're saying on a balcony that doesn't receive a lot of light, is light an issue?
So it is. It is very, very important. So you'll have you have different processes when it comes to hydroponics. And one of them is obviously, like we have our first phase of the farm is on a rooftop so that it receives that sun, because it needs to photosynthesize, right? It needs that process, it needs the nourishment. And another way is to engage it with a different type of light. If you don't have sunlight, then you can get a different stream of light where you can now mimic the sun, right? And mimic that aspect of what the sun would provide. So you don't necessarily need to have sunlight. You can purchase a light that's specifically for growing plants hydroponically, and that and that will do the trick. So I'm going to blend this really quick. It may be a little loud.
That's fine. We know it's loud. I have an arrow garden in my house, so it has artificial light. And I
okay.
On it.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, so Henry's on mute because of the sound of the Vitamix, if he's using a Vitamix. Something I personally could not live without. I use my Vitamix almost every day. It even makes soup, hot soup, and if you have it at the right part of the dial. But absolutely, the grow light is something that could be used and can be used outside. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's pretty much done, but I want to season it, and we want to add a little bit of salt to our peas, and the white pepper I mentioned.
What kind of salt are you using?
So I specifically use black salt. I'll show you. It's a clay-based salt. It's a very specific salt.
This is the one that tastes like eggs?
Yes, it's the one that tastes like eggs.
I use it.
Yeah, and it's so good for you because it doesn't stay in your system. Like, sea salt or like Himalayan salt. Yeah, it's so delicious. The reason why it's so good is that it seasons your food. It's delicious, but it doesn't harm you the way salt will do. It kind of leaves your system.
Wow, thank you.
And that's pretty much why I engage with it. So we seasoned that. We added the pepper. And now we are going to do the shallot. It's about a teaspoon of the shallot. And this is going to provide some, obviously, really good flavor. And then last but not least, the mint, right? And why mint? The mint really complements the sweetness of the peas. Yeah. And normally, it goes for like just a couple of leaves, but I like to add maybe like 10 leaves for this amount of peas, which was about 2 cups of peas, because I like to feel the flavor of that mint. So this will
Mint and
all
peas
go in,
are a marriage for sure.
right? Yeah, of
Yes,
course. And
totally a
so
marriage.
you would add some olive oil to this, but I'm opting out of it. Some people add a tablespoon or a teaspoon of olive oil, but we've opted out of the olive oil for this dish. So I will now blend that, and it's pretty much done.
Yeah, because once we put in the oil, then it's no longer whole foods plant-based. And some people use very small amounts of oil, or they might use something that's got some nuts in it, or coconut cream, for instance. I would play around with this myself, and I'd probably put in a little bit of vegetable broth or maybe some miso. I am going to try this. I've pureed peas before, but this is, I've never used the black salt, number one. So that is
Oh,
going to
really?
I add to it. Yes, never, never. I've used
Amazing.
regular salt or Himalayan salt, and that's why I was asking what kind of salt you were using. But
Yeah.
I probably will play around with it and add some vegetable broth.
Yeah, so that's also the trick. You can either boil your peas in vegetable broth or add, instead of the water that I
Oh,
added,
good.
yeah,
Yes.
instead of the water that I added, you can add a little bit of the vegetable broth to it. Now, I also like my peas to taste sweet, so I just opted for the water. I like the peas to taste like peas.
Yes, because the broth
Um,
give it the savoriness.
yeah, and
So
so
when you eat
what we
this
have,
on something, do you just eat it the way it is? Do
what's
you
that?
like on like a, I don't know, a toast point or a cracker or?
So you can think of this, and this is like as I pour it, you can think of this almost like a hummus.
Oh, okay.
You can use this in so many different ways. You can put it on toast. You can put it on crackers. You can eat it with carrots as a dip. An all-purpose dip and an all-purpose spread. And that is kind of what I wanted to engage the audience about around peas, because it's such a versatile ingredient, because
Well,
it can take
colors,
on whatever flavor.
yeah.
It's
Can
and so you can you
once
really
you get
engage it.
that in there, please hold it up so we can see
Yes,
it,
for sure. So
because
I'll
even the color, and I feel like the mint gave it a little more color.
of course. So here it is.
It's
Right
beautiful.
there.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yes.
And you might
Um,
even think it was hummus. So carrots,
yeah.
vegetables, dip,
Yes.
some kind, it's a dip as well.
It's a dip, and think of it as a dip, think of it as a spread, think of it also as a dressing. You can dilute it a little bit more and make
Mm,
it into a dressing. It
sure,
is
sure.
so multi-purpose. It really is the thing that you can pull and just add it to everything. And in many ways it's a secret, powerful ingredient that people are not necessarily engaging in that way. They're making it very sort of like one-dimensional. And it's not. The beauty of this is that it has so much protein also that you can really engage and have protein throughout the day with different flavor profiles. And so now off to the last portion of our cooking engagement, which is the asparagus. So here are the asparagus, and again, you can opt if you want to add a tablespoon of olive oil or not. We're going to opt to not do that, and we're going to season our asparagus with some black pepper.
One of the other things I like about this, Henry, is the idea of eating simply, where the ingredients are really the highlight, not the technique and the additions to them. because I think
Exactly.
that that's very much the American way. Um, because when you look at how indigenous food is engaged with, it's really honoring the food itself. It's not all these other things that we do to it. And obviously it's French cooking, who doesn't like to have that here and there. But I feel like it goes back to what you were saying about respecting the food, and not having to overpower it with a lot of ingredients and technique.
Yeah, it is, again, honoring what you're going to eat and also understanding what it tastes like. I think that we want to, in many ways, mask the taste
Yeah.
of food, and that's not, if we're going to decolonize our way out of this, we have to taste our food. We can't mask our food.
Yeah.
It is how it is. And so to this, I added a teaspoon of garlic. I added a little bit of salt and a tablespoon of water. Again, I'm opting out of oil, and now I'm going to pretty much start the process uh, here, and I'm going to set my timer because this is a very sort of a little bit more technical because you want these to come out really, really well and right. And it's so simple. We're going to cook these for just 4 minutes, and it's going to be 2 minutes on one side, 2 minutes on the other side, and it's going to be on high heat because we want to char the asparagus. We want that flavor profile of the char to be engaged here. So I'm just turning, sort of like seasoning, making sure that all of them have gotten the amount of salt. I'm going to taste it. It tastes great. And now we're going to engage it on the pan for 4 minutes. And it's very simple. It's just laying it high heat, putting it down, and
So
allowing
Steve
it to cook.
was saying that they grow their own peas in the garden.
Oh, that's
Uh-huh.
amazing.
And do what you do and eat them straight out of the pod.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also make a raw pesto out of it,
yeah.
which is
Yeah. So in essence, you add some basil, you add some of the nuts. You can make your own version of pesto, but you can make a pesto with this as well, just like they made it. That's the versatility of peas, and the beauty of peas is that uh, they take on really anything you give it. Anything you give it is gonna come to life because you know they sort of like they like to play. They, they they're friendly. Think of it as a friendly vegetable, right? They like to take on uh, other ingredients. So think of it like that when you think of peas, and whenever you want to engage with a flavor profile, or you want to use it, and you want to be very specific, you can do that with peas. So
yeah.
now we are engaging our
Yeah, you're
at high
using
heat.
cast iron, which is very hot. It's gonna give you that heat that you want, or so that you can sear them, because that's what you're doing on both sides, which is
Yeah,
great. And we're at our time, but while we're doing that, I did want to just let you tell Henry how to get in touch with you again, because there are several people asking about collaborating with this work, and not just about how to grow food, but this whole idea of food sovereignty, and addressing food insecurity with some of these solutions that you've been talking about tonight.
yes. So you can definitely find me on Instagram, which is Sustainable Poppy, Sustainable PAPI. The other way that you can find me is through Born Juice, also on Instagram. Or you can just engage with me on LinkedIn, Henry Obispo. That is pretty much also, I mean, one of the best ways to engage LinkedIn seems to be our present day sort of business card, right? But it's an easy way to engage and really to communicate and to sort of like build bridges. So definitely you can find me there. As we talk, also I'm just gonna plate so that you see kind of what it is that this would look like. So the idea is that we're doing a base of this beautiful green peas, and this complete meal, believe it or not, is incredibly filling and also super delicious. And I'll just show you pretty much what the simplicity the simplicity of this dish, but it is such a powerful
mouth is watering
meal. Yeah, it is such a powerful meal. I'll do this for the both of us.
Exactly. You have to do it. You have to do it. So can I just come to ReBORN Farms? Is that possible?
Can you what?
Come to ReBORN Farms?
So we are engaging to be open. We're not officially starting the process of engagement this season. We're looking to start in June. So after June, we're going to have dates where we're going to welcome the public. And because the idea is to connect the public to our work so that we are able to really find powerful networks and create networks so that this kind of work replicates, and also to teach as we move forward in the development of our phase 1 of the project, and then phase 2 and phase 3 and subsequently. So yeah, we will welcome the general public after June in some tours that we would have around that time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Henry. It was amazing. I'm taking so many nuggets away. And honestly, you have shifted my thinking about everything being personhood. I feel like that is such a loving, spiritual way to view life. And certainly when you look at the planet and how this planet was created, I believe for us to thrive, everything in it was for us to thrive. And if that's not happening, then we have truly, as you said, disconnected with the place that we live. Being that this is Earth Month, it's a perfect time to make that reconnection with the earth. And Henry has shown us how to do it with these delicious green foods. Please connect with Henry. And you can do that on his Instagram at Sustainable Poppy. You can go to LinkedIn for Henry Obispo. Follow Born Juice on Instagram, and also Plant Powered Metro New York. It's at PP. Oh, here we go. Thank you, PPMNY. And you can go to the website. As I said before, if you're someone who is not familiar eating this way, as you see, Henry made this amazing dish with no oil whatsoever. And we would think to put something in a pan, we have to put oil. We absolutely do not. But thank you, Henry. This was such a refreshing demo and presentation. Looking forward to discussions with you. That's CE Holmes, if you can see that. Yeah, it really was amazing, Henry. We appreciate you. I cannot wait to do this again. I'm sorry we had to wait so long, but so happy. You are well, looking great, thriving over there in Mott Haven, not too far from where I am. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in and staying on, for your questions, your comments, and good night.